Let's make an Asteroids game in Unity. This is an extreme explaining tutorial. Here is our asteroid game. With W we can move forward. With A key we can turn left, and with G key we can turn right. And with S key we can flip. And with space key we can shoot bullets. And the name of the game is to shoot as many asteroids as possible without being hit by them. And there we got hit, and then we appear in the middle as a ghost, and when we are a ghost we cannot be hit by an asteroid. Okay, let's now go to Unity and make the Asteroids game. We are inside Unity. In our sprites folder we have some images. Select the background. We can see that it is 1600 by 900 pixels. We can also see that we have 100 pixels per unit, which means that our background is 16 units wide and 9 units high. It also means that we should set our aspect ratio to 16 by 9, and that our camera size should be 4.5. Let's drag the background to the hierarchy. Set its order in layer to -1. Add a box collider 2D. Check the is trigger. And we can see the boundaries in the scene view. The next game object is our ship, so drag it to the hierarchy. Set order in layer to 1. Let's change its color to pure green. 00FF00. Add component box collider 2D. Let's edit it so we can make it a little tighter. Add also a rigid body 2D. Make it dynamic. Mass 1, linear drag 1, angular drag 3, and gravity 0. Make it continuous and interpolate. The next game object is the bullet. Drag it out to the hierarchy. Let's temporarily turn the ship off so we can see the bullet. Let's also make it pure green. 00FF00. Add component box collider 2D. Check the is trigger. Add a rigid body 2D. Make it kinematic and continuous and interpolate. The next game object is the asteroid. Add a polygon collider 2D. Add a rigid body 2D. Keep it dynamic, but set gravity to 0. Make it continuous and interpolate. And then we need something to spawn the asteroids. So make an empty game object and call it spawner. Let's put it at position 000. Let's add tags and layer to these game objects. We'll speed up the video. Now we want to configure our collision matrix. So go to Edit, Project Settings, and choose Physics 2D. The background should collide with asteroids and also with bullets. The ship should collide with asteroids and with nothing else. The bullets should collide with asteroids, but not with other bullets. The asteroids should collide with other asteroids. And the ignore layer is where we put objects that we don't want to collide with anything else. So we clear this. Let's close the project settings. We now want to add empty scripts to our game objects. So let's go to Scripts folder and create them. We'll speed up the video. Now the last thing we want to do is to turn the bullet and the asteroid game objects into prefabs. So take the bullet and drag it to the prefabs folder. Then we can delete it from the hierarchy. And also the asteroid. Drag it to prefabs. And delete it from the hierarchy. We are now done with configuring our game objects. So now we have to write our scripts, and we will begin with the ship script. Let's look at the needed variables. We have a reference to the rigid body, because we are going to add force to it, and a sprite renderer, because we are going to manipulate the transparency of our sprite. We have a boolean called force on, which controls if the force will be applied to our ship or not. Then a variable that tells how much force we apply. Then a float that controls if we should rotate our ship or not. 0 means no rotation, 1 means rotate left, and -1 means rotate right. Then a variable that tells how much we should rotate. Let's now go to the start method. Let's start by setting the reference to our rigid body and to our sprite renderer, and then setting the color and transparency of our ship. Then in the update we'll get hold of user inputs. If the W key is down, then we set force on to true, otherwise false. If the user presses the S key, we rotate the ship 180 degrees around the Z axis. If the user presses the A key, we set torque direction to 1. And if he presses the G key, we set it to -1. Otherwise, we set it to 0. There is one more thing we want to do on update, and that is to wrap around the boundary if we need to. And here is what the wraparound boundary looks like. We take our position and check if the x value is greater than 8. Which means that we are passing the right edge. And if so, then we move the ship to the left edge. And likewise for the other edges. And then we update the position. We also need fixed update to change our physics. If the force on is true, then we add force. And if the torque is not 0, then we add torque. Let's test this out by clicking on the play button. If we now hold the W key, we move forward across the boundary. And if we hold the A key, we rotate left. And if we hold the G key, we rotate right. And if we press the S key, we flip in the opposite direction. So everything works. Stop. Now we want to be able to shoot bullets. Let's go to the bullet's script. We need a reference to the rigid body, since we want to set the speed of the bullet. We also need the speed. The bullet is a prefab, and with prefabs we usually do not use start, instead we use awake. And in the awake we just want to set reference to the rigid body. Then we have a public method called shoot, which has a direction as a parameter, and which sets the velocity to normalized direction times the speed. Then we also want to check for collisions. The bullet is inside the background, so we want to check when it exits the background. That's why we are using onTrigger exit 2D. And in that case we want to destroy the bullet. On the other hand, when we hit the asteroid, we do it from outside. So that's why we want to check onTrigger enter 2D. And in that case we also want to destroy the bullet. Save and compile. Let's now return to the ship script. First, we need a reference to our bullet prefab. And on the update, we'll check if the user presses the space key, and if so, we instantiate the bullet and call its shoot method. The direction is the direction that our ship is pointing to, and that is transform.up. Let's now save and compile. And then in the inspector, drag the bullet prefab to our slot in the ship script. Let's test this out. Press space and fire bullets. Hold down the D key and press space, and it shoots while turning around. So it works. Stop. Now we come to the spawner script. We need some variables. We need a reference to the asteroid prefab. We need a spawn rate so we know how often to spawn the asteroids. And we need a distance from the center from where we should spawn. In the start, we invoke the spawn method starting immediately and then calling it every spawn rate seconds. Let's look at our spawn function. Our spawn point is a random point on a circle with radius spawn distance. Then we will choose a random angle between -15 and +15 degrees. And then we will make a rotation of angle degrees around the z-axis. That will give us a quaternion here called rotation. We can now instantiate our asteroid. The direction of our asteroid will be rotation times negative spawn point. Negative because we want the asteroid to move towards the center. This will give us a vector 2 direction. And how this works is a quaternion times a vector. In Unity you just multiply those two. But behind the scenes, a quaternion times a vector times the inverse of the quaternion is performed, which gives us a vector back. To understand this, you have to look up quaternions. Otherwise, you can just use it like done here. Then we choose a random mass and we call the asteroids kick method, passing on the mass and the direction parameters. Let's now go to the asteroid script. In this script we will use lists. So let's use system.collections.generic. Then we need some variables. And here we have an array of asteroid sprites. Then we need a rigid body, sprite renderer, and polygon collider 2D, because we use polygon colliders for our asteroids. And then asteroid will start off with a certain speed. The asteroid is a prefab, so instead of start, we'll use awake. We are setting the reference to our components. And then we have our public kick method. What this method does is to choose a random asteroid sprite, and then updates the Polygon Collider 2D path based on the chosen sprite. First we create an empty list called path, then we use the getPhysicsShape method to store the shape in the path list. And then we set the Polygon Collider's path using the setPath method. Observe that this method requires an array and not a list. So that's why we convert the list to an array using the toArray method. Then we set the mass and the scale of our asteroid. The mass will be the mass that was given as the parameter. Then the width will be a random number within a certain range. And the height will be the reciprocal of the width. And then we will scale with these values, times the mass. So we are just stretching and squeezing our asteroids in order to get a variety of shapes. Then we set the velocity by taking the given direction, normalize it, and then we multiply with the speed. And for our torque, we just pick a random number within a certain range. Now we need to check for collisions as well. If we collide with the background, we will destroy the asteroid. And if we collide with the bullet, we will also destroy the asteroid. But before we do that, we will check if it is large enough to be split into two parts. And if it is, we will split it by calling the split method twice. And here is the split method. It will set the position to the same as the current asteroid with a little offset. And then we create a new asteroid with a half the mass and the random direction. And then we call the kick method. Save and compile. Select the asteroid prefab. In the inspector under the script, we see a sprite array. Enter 4 as the number of elements. Then go to Sprites folder and drag in the 4 asteroid sprites. Select the spawner and in the inspector under the script, drag the asteroid prefab to the empty slot. Click on Play to test. And there are our asteroids. But when the asteroids collide with the ship does not disappear. So let's stop and fix that. Let's go to the ship script. At the bottom, let's add onCollisionCenter 2D method. If the ship collides with an asteroid, we will move the ship way out from the screen and set its velocity and angular velocity to 0. And then turn off collisions. And after 3 seconds, invoke the reset method. How do we turn off collisions? We just put our ship in the ignore layer, which does not collide with anything. And then the reset function. We will make a ghost ship by turning the alpha value to 0.2. We set the position to center and we make the ship point up. And then we wait for 3 seconds and then we turn the collisions on. In Turn on collisions, we set the alpha value to 1, making the ship opaque. And we set the layer back to ship so we can collide with asteroids again. Click on play and see if this works. Here comes the asteroids. Let's collide. And the ship disappears. and reappears in 3 seconds as a ghost ship. And after 3 seconds it can collide again. So it works. There are several improvements we could do. We could add flames when we are adding force to the ship. We could set explosion particles when the asteroid or the ship gets destroyed. We could add sounds. We could add user interface so we can see the score, game over, and ability to restart the game. And we could add different levels. We could also add better graphics and more animations, and so on. But this is outside the scope of this tutorial. If you would like to see the improvements done, make a comment below. Thank you for watching.